There's a strange kind of silence that lingers in a cemetery during late afternoons. It's not the silence of darkness, nor the loneliness of being alone. It's the kind of quiet that makes you stop speaking, because all you can do is listen. A soft breeze rustles through the bare trees, loosening the last few leaves, which fall like whispers from far away. The setting sun paints a narrow strip of amber light across the cold stone ground. A few black birds flutter down in the distance, vanishing behind rows of tombstones. In the farthest, loneliest corner of the cemetery, where almost no one goes, 4 little girls sit quietly. They look nearly identical, like 4 mirrored reflections. Each wears a faded dress, an old wool cardigan, and mismatched shoes. The oldest gently wipes dust off a headstone with a cloth. Her hand trembles, but her eyes are steady. She does this every day. Another girl sits cross-legged on the grass, clutching a ragged teddy bear, torn, stained, its eye missing. She says nothing. She rests her head gently against the cold gravestone, as if trying to hear something whispered from within. The other 2 girls sit side by side, wrapped in a thin scarf they share. One of them sings, softly. So softly it seems even the wind might steal the melody. A lullaby. Old. Fragile. Gentle enough to melt a heart in just a few notes. The gravestone is worn. The flowers left from yesterday are wilted. But today, a fresh bunch of wildflowers has been placed at its base, likely hand-picked by the girls on their way here. The name carved into the stone is barely legible. But they don't need to read it. They remember. They know. They feel their mother's presence, in every gust of wind, every beam of sunlight, every fallen leaf. At the entrance of the cemetery, a black luxury car slows to a stop. The door opens. A man steps out. A long black coat. Polished shoes. Salt and pepper hair, even though he's not yet 60. His face holds only a few lines, but his eyes seem to carry a lifetime of weight. He's the kind of man whose silence feels heavy, the kind that fills a room even when no words are spoken. No one here knows his real name. They just call him Mr. Jonathan, the CEO of a tech empire that's reached into every corner of America. But today, he's not here as a leader or a public figure. Today is his mother's birthday, the woman who raised him alone in a cheap apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. She passed 17 years ago. And every year, on this day, Jonathan comes here. He stands in silence. Places a single white rose. Then leaves. No one knows why he really comes. But he remembers. He remembers the last argument they had, about a woman his mother didn't approve of. He chose to walk away, chose ambition, chose reputation, and lost everything. That woman disappeared from his life without a trace. The child might have been born. Or not. Jonathan never knew. And he never had the courage to find out. Today, like always, he walks in silently. Coldly. Without tears. Until he hears that melody. A fragile voice. Barely audible. As if someone is trying not to cry while singing. It's a lullaby, one his mother used to sing to him when he was a little boy, wrapped in blankets on freezing winter nights. He freezes on the stone path. Turns his head toward the sound. And then, he sees them. 4 tiny figures. Sitting by a grave. One of the girls looks up, and in that moment, Jonathan feels his heart drop. That face. Those eyes. That small nose, those tight lips. All of it, copied straight from a memory he thought was long buried. The only woman he ever truly loved, before he chose wrong. Again. He doesn't speak. Doesn't move. Only the wind stirs. And that soft singing grows even softer. The girls don't notice him. They don't see him. But he cannot look away. His eyes well up. He doesn't know why. He can't stop it. Because something deep within him, something long asleep, just woke up. Jonathan stands still, as the wind dies down. His coat shifts slightly, as if touched by something unseen. The four girls don't know they're being watched. The eldest carefully adjusts the bouquet of flowers in the soil, trying to make them stand, even though their stems are already soft and bent. She says nothing. Her face blank, but her eyes carry the weight of someone who has lived far beyond her years. The little one hugs the teddy bear close, then gently presses a kiss to the cold, gray stone. Jonathan doesn't know if he took a deep breath, or if his heart simply skipped a beat. How long had it been, since he'd witnessed something this pure? No cameras. No scripts. Just the unfiltered love of four children for a mother they can no longer touch. And the strangest part, what held him there, was the feeling that he somehow knew them. He starts walking closer. Slowly. Carefully. As if afraid the scene might vanish if he moved too fast. Something in him pulls him forward. A string he can't see, but can no longer resist. Just a few steps away now. A light breeze brushes by. And one of the girls turns. Her eyes meet his. No fear. No surprise. Just silence. As if she had been expecting him. Jonathan stops in his tracks. Frozen. She continues to look at him. No words. No retreat. No questions. After a moment, she nods. Not a greeting. More like recognition. I'm sorry, he murmurs, voice hoarse, I didn't mean to intrude. The eldest turns. Her face isn't scared, but guarded. The one with the teddy bear hugs it tighter. Do you girls need help with anything? Jonathan asks. A clumsy question. Even he hears how awkward it sounds. He, a CEO who's spoken before thousands, suddenly doesn't know how to talk to a child. We're okay, the eldest replies, softly but firmly. I've seen you here, every day. She doesn't answer. But the little one, the one who had been singing, says gently. This is our mommy. Jonathan glances down at the gravestone. His eyes scan the faded letters. Maria Lynn Hart. 1985 to 2022. His mind spins. No. It can't be. He steps back. Maria. That name. That name had been buried in his memory for over 2 decades. She had been everything. Warmth. Light. The quiet dream he once believed would last forever. But then came the promotion. The pressure. The voice of his mother saying, she's not right for you. And he let her go. She vanished. No calls. No letters. Nothing. It was as if the world had swallowed her whole. Did you know our mommy? One of the girls asks, pulling him back to the present. Jonathan hesitates. I once knew someone with that name. A long time ago. When I was very young. The eldest looks at him, for a long time. Searching his face for something. A trace of truth. A shadow of sorrow. We don't have a daddy, she says. As if it's something long accepted. Not questioned. Silence stretches out. Heavy. Endless. Jonathan wants to say something. Anything. But he can't. His throat tightens. His eyes stay fixed on that name, as if it might come alive and speak for him. Can I leave these flowers here? He asks, holding the white rose he brought. Of course, the girl says, offering a faint smile, like the last sliver of daylight. Jonathan kneels. Places the rose beside the wildflowers. Stands again, eyes lingering on the stone. What's your name? The girl asks. He pauses, then quietly replies. Jonathan. She nods. I'm Ellie. That's Hope, Mia, and June. 4 names. Soft as wind, but etched deep in his heart like a quiet wound. And as he turns to leave, he hears Hope, the one with the teddy bear, whisper something. I think Mommy would be happy that he stopped today. Jonathan isn't sure if he heard it right, but his chest tightens. For the first time in years, he doesn't feel alone in this world of power and silence. The next morning, Jonathan couldn't sleep. Not really. He tried. Tossed. Turned. Closed his eyes, again and again, but every time he saw them. The girls. Their faces. That song. It didn't echo in his ears, it echoed somewhere deeper. A place he had forgotten existed. A place he thought had shut down long ago, somewhere between his 3rd corporate merger and the last time he laughed for real. By 6 a.m., he was already dressed. He didn't tell his assistant. Didn't check his email. Didn't schedule a meeting. He just got into the car. Drove the same route. Slower this time. The cemetery entrance appeared before him, as quiet and solemn as yesterday. But this time, he didn't bring flowers. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because he didn't know what to say. Maybe because he didn't want to perform some ritual. He just needed to see them. And there they were. Same corner. Same stone. Same 4 girls. Ellie gently wiping the headstone, her face calm but tired. Hope humming softly, barely above a whisper. Mia carefully gathering fallen leaves and arranging them around the grave. And June, the smallest, twirling her worn teddy bear in circles, as if dancing for their mother. Jonathan didn't approach. Not yet. He stood behind a large tree, about 20 paces away, just watching. His heart pounded. Not out of fear. But something else. Something like reverence. Something like being in the presence of something sacred, too raw to touch. He had never felt this way before. Not in boardrooms. Not at award ceremonies. Not even when he rang the NASDAQ bell. This was different. This was real. He watched the way Ellie reached out to hold June's hand when the little one looked cold. Watched as Hope shared her scarf without a word. Saw Mia reach into her pocket and pull out a broken crayon, placing it beside the gravestone like it was treasure. They didn't have much. But what they had, they gave. And that broke him more than poverty ever could. After a while, the girls stood, brushing off their clothes. They didn't have backpacks. No lunchboxes. No sign of an adult. They simply walked. Hand in hand. Back through the dirt path behind the cemetery. Jonathan waited a few seconds. Then followed. Not too close. Just enough to keep them in sight. The path led behind a row of abandoned houses, then curved into a narrow alley. Faded paint. Broken windows. Walls covered in mildew. At the very end, the girls stopped in front of a structure barely holding itself together, sheet metal, old wood, and a curtain hanging as a door. No house number. No porch light. Just a clothesline stretched between 2 nails with faded kids' clothes flapping in the wind. Jonathan stopped at the corner. Heart sinking. This was their home. He stood there for a long time. Didn't move. Didn't breathe too loudly. That evening, he didn't go home. Instead, he checked into a small hotel a few blocks away. A place where no one would recognize him. No room service. No valet. Just a bed, a lamp, and silence. And for the first time in years, he sat down to write a letter. By hand. To no one in particular. If you're still out there somewhere, would you forgive me? I let you walk away. I let ambition blind me. I let my fear speak louder than my love. Today, I met 4 little angels. They have your eyes. And the same ache inside them. I don't know what to do. But I know I can't walk away again. Day, he returned. No flowers. This time, he brought a paper bag. Inside, 2 small loaves of bread. 4 juice boxes. A pack of tissues. And a weathered children's book, Goodnight Moon, the one his own mother used to read to him. When he arrived, the girls were already there. This time, Ellie looked up first. Her eyes met his without surprise. I knew you'd come back, she said calmly. Jonathan walked forward slowly, like someone approaching a sacred memory. I brought a few things for you girls, he said, holding out the bag. Ellie glanced at her sisters, then nodded. Thank you, sir. Hope, Mia, and June gathered around, peeking inside. Their eyes lit up, but they didn't squeal, didn't shout. It was a quiet kind of gratitude, one learned through hardship. Jonathan sat down on the grass beside them. Can you tell me about your mom? He asked gently. Ellie looked away, her eyes distant. She could cook anything. Even when there was nothing to cook, she said with a soft smile. She used to say, a pot of soup can be a feast, if it's made with love. Jonathan swallowed hard. When did she pass? Almost 2 years ago. Cancer. No money for treatment. Before she left, she told us. No matter what happens, we should come here every day. So she wouldn't feel lonely. The words slid into Jonathan's chest like a warm blade. He wanted to say that he knew Maria. That she had once been his everything. That maybe, just maybe, he was there. No. Not yet. Not while Ellie still looked at him like a stranger, cautious, watchful. Instead, he smiled softly and said, I think, your mom was an incredible woman. Hope, who had been quiet, nodded slowly. Then whispered. And she's still here, right? Right here with us. Jonathan turned to her. Yes, he said, his voice catching. Yes, I believe she is. Did you ever lose someone? Hope asked. Such a simple question. And yet, impossible to answer. Jonathan looked straight into her eyes. Then nodded. I lost the one person I should never have let go. That night, Jonathan sat by the window of his small hotel room. The light was dim. The street below was quiet. And in his hands was an old black and white photograph. A younger version of himself, full of hope. Beside him, a woman with long hair, smiling gently. Maria. He had carried this photo for over 2 decades. But never had the courage to truly look at it. Until now. Because when he looked, he saw Ellie's face. Hope's eyes. June's smile. Mia's quiet kindness. And he whispered to the photo, voice breaking. I think I found them. The next few days passed, slowly. Jonathan returned to the cemetery each morning. Never at the same time, but always around the same hour when the sunlight filtered through the trees just right. Golden. Soft. Almost forgiving. He never stayed long. Just enough to watch. From a distance. He didn't want to startle them. Didn't want to push too soon. He wasn't even sure what he was doing anymore, just that something inside him was no longer still. Each day, the girls were there. Same routines. Ellie wiping the gravestone. Hope singing softly, always the same lullaby. Mia organizing fallen leaves into careful shapes. June talking to the wind, as if her mother might answer back. And every day, Jonathan brought something. One day, it was a small box of colored pencils. The next, a few apples and a folded-up umbrella. Another time, a hand-drawn map with directions to a nearby library, circled in blue ink. He didn't always give the gifts directly. Sometimes he left them near the stone when the girls weren't looking. Other times, he placed them inside a small tin can tucked under a tree root. And every time, without fail, Ellie would find it. Examine it. Share it. But never ask who it came from. Until one day. Why do you keep coming back? The question came quietly from behind him. Jonathan turned. Ellie was standing there, arms folded, eyes cautious but not unkind. He hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because I feel like I should have come here much earlier. Ellie tilted her head slightly. What do you mean? Jonathan didn't answer right away. He looked toward the gravestone, the girls still sitting around it, unaware of this conversation. I lost someone, he said finally. A long time ago. Someone who mattered. Ellie's gaze didn't waver. Mama? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. He looked at her. How old are you? He asked instead. 12, she replied. But people think I'm older. I guess, growing up without help does that to you. Jonathan nodded slowly. I believe that. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ellie asked, are you rich? The question hit him sideways. He looked at her, straight in the eyes, and said, yes. But I don't think I ever felt more poor than I do now. Ellie didn't smile. Didn't laugh. But something in her shoulders relaxed. Okay, she said simply, turning to walk back to her sisters. Jonathan called after her. Ellie, why do you come here every day? Even in the rain. She didn't turn around. Because she asked us to, she said over her shoulder. And because love doesn't stop just because someone leaves. That night, Jonathan sat at his desk, staring at an empty notepad. He had built empires. Managed thousands. Solved mergers and bankruptcies with pen strokes. But he couldn't write a single word to explain what he felt. He kept seeing Ellie's face. Hope's song. June's tiny hands. And that sentence, love doesn't stop just because someone leaves. He whispered it out loud to the night. Maybe, that was what he was doing here. Trying to love again. Even if it was late. Even if it was imperfect. Even if it meant starting with nothing more than a quiet watching, from behind a tree. Jonathan didn't plan to go again the next day. He had work. Calls to return. A conference in Chicago scheduled for that weekend. But his feet, they took him back. As if his soul had committed to a routine before his mind could object. This time, he didn't bring anything. No bread. No toys. Just himself. He stood behind the tree again, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the same scene. The girls were there, as always. Rain clouds loomed above, but they hadn't run for shelter. Ellie was brushing wet leaves off the gravestone with her sleeve. Hope's song was softer today, more broken than usual. June sat on the ground, her teddy bear wrapped in a grocery bag to keep it dry. Jonathan's coat was soaked at the shoulders before he even noticed. He didn't care. But then, someone else noticed him. Sir. It was an old man. Gray beard, weathered face, a cemetery caretaker, maybe. He held a rake in one hand, looking at Jonathan with quiet curiosity. You come here often now, the man said. Did you lose someone too? Jonathan blinked. Took a breath. Yes, he answered. The man studied him. Then looked toward the girls. They come here every day, he said, nodding toward them. No one ever picks them up. I tried asking once, but the oldest one just said, we're okay. Mom's waiting. Jonathan's throat tightened. The man added, that one, he pointed at Ellie, she's got eyes that don't belong to a child. Like she's lived more years than I have. Jonathan looked down. "I think I knew their mother," he said softly. The old man was quiet for a beat. Then, in a voice rough like dry leaves, he said, "Then maybe God brought you back here for a reason." Jonathan turned sharply. "What?" "Maybe it's not about grieving anymore," the man said, shoulders rising in a slow shrug. "Maybe it's about mending." He turned and walked off, leaving Jonathan in stunned silence. Mending. The word stuck. It wasn't the kind of language he used. He spoke in terms of strategy, mitigation, rebranding. But this was different. He left the cemetery before the girls did that day. Didn't want them to see his eyes, how red they had become. How lost he looked in a place built for remembrance. Back at the hotel, he paced. He felt stupid. Restless. Like a man standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. His reflection in the mirror looked tired. Lines deeper. Eyes dull. And yet, there was something else. A kind of clarity, the kind that only comes when you've faced something too long hidden. That night, he opened the drawer beside his bed. Inside was a small envelope. It had been there for years. He opened it. Inside was a note, written in Maria's handwriting. From a time when they still passed notes instead of silence. "One day, you'll realize you can't outrun your heart. And on that day, I hope you'll be brave enough to stop." Jonathan folded the note, hands trembling. He sat on the edge of the bed, ran his fingers through his hair, and whispered into the dark. "I'm trying." Jonathan didn't rehearse what he would say. He told himself he wouldn't speak at all. But something about the way the clouds broke that morning, casting streaks of sunlight across the headstones, made the silence feel too heavy. He arrived just as the girls were settling into their usual places. Ellie brushing leaves off the stone. Hope humming, though her voice cracked now and then. Mia lining up little twigs in perfect rows. June holding her bear, rocking slightly, as if comforting it more than herself. Jonathan stood at a distance. Then took one step forward. Then another. And before he could stop himself, he was standing a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, breath shallow. Ellie looked up first. She didn't seem surprised. But her posture straightened. Her eyes became guarded. Hope stopped humming. June held her bear tighter. "Good morning," Jonathan said softly. No one responded. He shifted his weight awkwardly. I was just passing by," he lied, poorly. "And I saw you here." Again. Ellie nodded, but said nothing. Jonathan glanced at the gravestone. "It's a beautiful place," he murmured. Still no response. He sighed quietly. "I'm sorry if I'm intruding," he added. "I just..." His voice faltered. "I wanted to say, I admire your devotion. You girls coming here. Every day." Finally, Ellie spoke. "It's not devotion. It's love." Jonathan blinked. A pause. Then he asked, "Can I sit?" Ellie hesitated. Then nodded, slowly. He sat beside the grave, leaving space between them, a careful distance. Hope and Mia eyed him, uncertain. June peeked at him from behind her bear. Jonathan took a slow breath. "I knew someone once," he said. She used to come to places like this. Not because she liked cemeteries, but because it made her feel closer to the people she missed." Ellie looked at him sideways. "Our mom said that, too," she said quietly. Jonathan smiled faintly. "I think, maybe she and I shared more than I realized." Hope's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you know her?" she asked. Jonathan hesitated. "I knew a woman named Maria once," he said. "A long time ago." That name. It floated in the air like perfume from a memory. Ellie's fingers froze on the gravestone. Hope looked down. Jonathan waited, unsure if he'd said too much. Then Ellie turned toward him. She never talked much about the past, she said. Just little things. Mostly about us. She said we were miracles, Mia added softly. Jonathan's throat tightened. I believe that, he whispered. June, who had remained quiet until now, stepped forward. She held out a tiny hand, the one not gripping the bear, and pointed to the grave. This is our mama, she said. You can say hi, if you want. Jonathan smiled, the kind of smile that hurts because it comes from too deep. Hi, Maria, he said gently, eyes never leaving the stone. And for the first time since he returned, he felt like he had come home. The sky turned gray again that afternoon. The kind of gray that made everything look softer, and sadder. Jonathan stayed longer than usual, seated quietly beside the girls. Not asking questions. Just listening. Hope resumed her humming. June drew shapes in the dirt with a twig. Mia braided blades of grass into uneven little knots. And Ellie, she just sat. Still. Calm. But watching everything. It was Ellie who broke the silence. Did you love her? The question hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Jonathan turned to her slowly. I did, he answered, without hesitation. Ellie nodded, as if she'd already known. She used to stare at this one photo before bed, Ellie said. We never saw it. She always put it away before we could. Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. She cried sometimes, Mia added, her voice so small it could have been mistaken for the wind. But only when she thought we were asleep. June looked up. Sometimes, she talked to someone who wasn't there. She said his name was Joe. Jonathan felt his breath catch. Joe. No one had called him that since Maria. He looked down at his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't know what? Ellie asked gently. He looked at her, and for the first time, truly saw her. The strength. The guarded heart. And the eyes that didn't match her age. I didn't know she had children, he said, voice cracking. Hope looked at him, tilting her head. You didn't know about us? Jonathan shook his head slowly. I left before I could. I thought she moved on. He didn't say the rest. That he'd chosen ambition. That his mother disapproved. That he ran. But Ellie didn't press. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in plastic, a small, creased envelope. She left this in her old coat, Ellie said. I found it after she passed. Jonathan took it carefully, hands trembling. Inside was a note. Short. Faded. Written in Maria's unmistakable handwriting. If Joe ever comes back, tell him I forgive him. Tell him they have his smile. And his stubborn heart. Jonathan's eyes blurred. He folded the note slowly. Held it to his chest. He didn't speak for a while. The rain began, gentle at first. The kind of rain that felt more like a sigh from the clouds than a storm. The girls didn't run. They stayed by the stone. Stayed with him. And for the first time, he didn't want to leave either. That night, the rain came harder. The kind of rain that didn't ask permission. It slammed the streets. Soaked everything in seconds. Flooded gutters. Drowned silence. Jonathan couldn't sleep. The hotel room felt too warm, too still. His mind kept circling back to the girls. He pictured their little hands wiping down a wet gravestone, their threadbare coats clinging to small shoulders, June's teddy bear darkened with water. They don't even have umbrellas. A flash of lightning lit the sky. And that's when he heard it, a noise outside, faint but sharp. Sirens. Not the distant kind. Not the city background kind. These were close. Urgent. And something in his chest just dropped. He grabbed his keys. Didn't think. Just moved. Minutes later, his car skidded to a stop in front of the alley near the girls' makeshift shelter, the one he'd followed them 2 days ago. People were gathered. Flashlights bounced off metal and puddles. An ambulance stood with its doors open. Jonathan ran. "Ellie," he called. "Hope. Girls." A police officer stepped in front of him. "Sir, please stay back." "I know them," he shouted. "I know the kids." From the shadows, a small voice cut through. "Mr. Jonathan." It was Hope. Soaked. Barefoot. Trembling. She ran to him and clung to his waist. "It's June," she sobbed. She collapsed. She wouldn't wake up. Jonathan didn't wait. He pushed past the officer, his shoes splashing through ankle-deep water. Inside the broken shack, Ellie was kneeling beside a small form wrapped in wet blankets. June. Her lips were pale. Her eyes half-closed. Her little chest rose and fell in uneven, shallow breaths. "She's burning up," Ellie whispered, panic cracking her usually calm voice. Jonathan scooped June into his arms. "She needs a hospital. Now." The EMTs rushed forward, but Jonathan didn't let go. He carried her straight into the ambulance, soaking wet, his coat stuck to his back. Inside, the medic checked her vitals. Severe fever. Dehydration. She's gone too long in the cold. Possible pneumonia. Jonathan nodded, eyes locked on June. "I'm staying," he said. At the hospital, hours blurred. Jonathan paced. Saturday. Stood again. Rubbed his face. Paced more. The girls waited in the hallway, huddled together in borrowed blankets. Ellie hadn't cried, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Jonathan brought them water. Crackers. Called a nurse every half hour. And finally, when the sun began to rise, soft and gray, the doctor stepped out. "She's stable," he said. "Still weak. But she'll be okay." Jonathan nearly collapsed. The girls broke down. Even Ellie cried this time, the kind of tears you hold back until it's safe to let them out. Later, in the recovery room, June opened her eyes. Her voice was barely audible. "Did Mama come?" Jonathan knelt by her bed. "No, sweetheart," he whispered. "But your sisters did. And I did too." June blinked slowly. "You're warm," she said. And then, she smiled. "Just like Mama." Jonathan bit his lip. Lowered his head. And for the first time, he prayed. Not for success. Not for power. Just for the chance, to keep showing up. Jonathan sat alone in the hospital's dim hallway, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled over his lips. The girls had finally fallen asleep, all three curled on one narrow couch under a donated blanket. June was still inside the recovery room, her tiny frame buried beneath wires and warmth. He stared at the floor for a long time. Then, slowly, he pulled out his wallet. Not for cash. But for a photograph. Faded. Creased. A younger him. And Maria, smiling, wild hair blowing across her cheek, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. They looked free. Free in a way he hadn't felt in years. He pressed the photo to his chest. And that's when Ellie stirred. She didn't say anything. Just sat up quietly and looked at him. Their eyes met. He offered a small smile. She didn't smile back. But she didn't look away either. "Is June okay?" she whispered. "She's stable," he said. "The doctors are optimistic." Ellie nodded, folding her arms around her knees. There was a long pause. Then she asked, so quietly he almost missed it. Who are you, really? Jonathan's breath hitched. I mean, Ellie continued, you said you knew our mom. That you loved her. He nodded slowly. Then why didn't you come sooner? There it was. The question he had feared most, simple, honest, and sharp. He looked at her, eyes heavy. Because I was a coward, he said. Ellie blinked. I met your mother when we were just kids. She was light. I was fire. She knew how to calm storms. I only knew how to make them. He paused. We fell in love. But I walked away. Why? She asked. He swallowed. Because my mother, your grandmother, didn't approve. Because I was building a career, chasing something I thought was more important. Because I thought I had time. I thought she'd wait. He stared at the floor again. But she didn't. She left. And I deserved that. Ellie said nothing. Then, almost mechanically, she reached into her small backpack and pulled something out. A necklace. Silver chain. Small teardrop pendant. The letter J carved into the center. She wore this every day, Ellie said. Said it reminded her of someone who once made her heart ache in the best and worst ways. Jonathan reached out, hands trembling. The moment his fingers touched the pendant, something in him broke. She kept that, he whispered, voice cracking. Ellie nodded. She never told us your name. But sometimes, she talked in her sleep. She said, Jonathan, once. Tears filled his eyes. I didn't know you existed, he said. I swear to you, I didn't. If I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you. Ellie's gaze softened, just slightly. And now, she asked. Now I'm here, he said. And I don't want to leave. He took a shaky breath. Ellie. I don't know for certain. No test, no papers. But I think. I'm your father. I think you're my daughter's. Silence. Thick. Still. Sacred. Hope had woken up by now. She was listening. She stood slowly, walked over, and placed something in Jonathan's hand. It was June's teddy bear. She said if she ever met her dad, she'd give him this, Hope said, voice soft. Because he must have been really lonely to leave. Jonathan looked down at the threadbare bear. Then at her. Then at Ellie. And his voice broke. I am so sorry. Hope leaned her head on his arm. Ellie looked at him a moment longer, then whispered. Don't say it with words. Jonathan blinked. Say it by staying. The hospital room was quiet. June had fallen back into a gentle sleep, her breathing steadier now, cheeks slightly pink instead of pale. The others remained nearby, Ellie sitting by the window, Hope curled in the chair with her sketch pad, Mia asleep on the floor with a blanket pulled to her chin. Jonathan sat beside the bed, not speaking. He didn't need to. The weight in the room wasn't loud. It was gentle, like a hush before someone says something important. Finally, Ellie looked up from the window. Her voice, when it came, was calm. But there was a quiet crack beneath each word. You don't have to say sorry again. Jonathan turned. I already heard it, she said, and I think. I believe you mean it. He nodded slowly. But just because we believe you, doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. That stopped him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't yelling. She was just, honest. You weren't there when Mom got sick, she continued. You weren't there when she couldn't afford medicine. When we had to move out of our place. When June cried because she was hungry. When Hope gave up art because crayons cost money. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. You missed everything. And we missed having someone like you. Jonathan's throat tightened. I know, he whispered. I missed everything too. Hope looked up now. She didn't speak, just held up her drawing. A rough sketch of a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. Around him were 4 girls, smaller, but drawn with smiles. All of them were holding onto his coat. Below it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Maybe it's not too late." Jonathan felt tears sting again, not from regret, this time, but something else. Hope stood and crossed the room. "Can I ask something?" He nodded. "If you really are our dad, then what now?" Jonathan looked at her. At Ellie. At Mia, still asleep. And at June, the tiniest of them all. "I don't have all the answers," he said slowly. "But I know one thing. I don't want to be someone who disappears again." Hope tilted her head. "You want to stay?" "I want to stay," he said. "If you'll let me." Ellie stood up from the window and crossed to where he sat. She didn't hug him. She didn't smile. She just sat down next to him. Close enough that their shoulders touched. "You don't need to fix everything overnight," she said. "We've been surviving without a father for a long time." Jonathan nodded. "I know. But maybe," Ellie continued, "now it's time we learn how to live with one." And for the first time, Jonathan didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and let the warmth of her words sink deep into the places in him that had been cold for years. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently across the hospital floor, soft golden beams that slipped past the blinds and fell over June's sleeping form. Jonathan sat in the corner, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his tie loosened, eyes red but clear. He hadn't slept. But he felt more awake than he had in years. Ellie walked in carrying a paper cup of coffee. She handed it to him without a word, then sat beside him. "Thanks," he murmured. They sipped in silence. Then Ellie said something unexpected. "You snore." Jonathan nearly choked. She smirked, the tiniest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Hope, now drawing on the window with her finger, added, "Really loud. Like, car engine loud." Jonathan laughed. It came from deep in his chest, rusty, like an old gate opening. It startled him. He hadn't laughed like that in decades. Later that afternoon, the discharge papers came. June was still weak but well enough to go home. Except, home wasn't a real place. Not yet. Jonathan stood with his phone in hand, staring out the hospital window, as Mia tugged at his jacket. "Do we have to go back to the broken house?" she asked softly. "No," he said. And then he added, "Not ever again." That evening, they moved into a small rental apartment near the hospital, a temporary space Jonathan found through a friend. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen that worked. Warm water. Blankets that didn't smell like mold. He let the girls choose their own beds. June picked the one closest to the window, so the moon can watch me sleep. Hope requested shelves for her drawings. Ellie asked for one thing only. "Can the door lock from inside?" "Yes," Jonathan said. "And only you will have the key." That night, he cooked pasta, badly. The noodles stuck together. The sauce was too salty. Mia still called it the best meal she'd had in a year. After dinner, they all sat on the floor, eating from mismatched plates. No TV. No music. Just the sound of June giggling as Hope tried to twirl spaghetti with a spoon. Jonathan leaned back, arms around his knees, watching it all like a man watching fire for the first time. "I missed this," he said. Ellie looked at him, confused. "You missed pasta." He shook his head, smiling gently. "No. I missed the feeling of being needed." She didn't say anything. But she scooted just a little closer to him. In the days that followed, routines formed. He drove them to school. Learned how to pack lunches, badly. Figured out what snacks each girl liked. Hope liked grapes, Mia hated crusts, June wanted jelly on everything. He got used to noise. And they got used to him. One evening, as he folded tiny socks in the laundry room, something he never thought he'd do, he paused. Looked at the pile. So small. So personal. And then it hit him. He wasn't just helping. He was living it. Not observing. Not apologizing. Becoming. One night, as they sat on the rug, Hope crawled into his lap. No words, just the comfort of a child choosing where she belonged. Jonathan wrapped his arms around her. "You okay?" he whispered. "I think so," she said. "But, are you okay?" He blinked. "I think. I'm finally getting there." Mia leaned against his side, eyes half closed. Ellie sat nearby, sketching in her new notebook. June, asleep with her thumb in her mouth, clutched his shirt even as she dreamed. And Jonathan knew, no matter what came next, this was real. Messy. Fragile. Beautiful. Love wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it looked like folded socks. Burned toast. A shared blanket. Or the sound of 4 little girls breathing quietly in the same room as a man who once had everything, and lost it, only to discover what truly mattered was what he never knew he needed. To be theirs. A few weeks passed. The days got longer. The weather warmed. And the apartment, though small and borrowed, began to feel like a home. There was laughter now. Real laughter. Not the polite kind that masks pain. But the kind that escapes without warning. Spilled milk, mismatched socks, Jonathan trying to braid Mia's hair and ending up with something that resembled a bird's nest. Hope had her corner by the window, where the sunlight landed perfectly for her to draw. June, still tiny, was growing stronger. She began humming again, sometimes softly repeating the lullaby her mother once sang. Jonathan would freeze every time, but not in pain anymore. In reverence. Ellie, stoic, quiet, too old for her years. Ellie, smiled more often. Not big smiles. But the kind that sneak onto your face when you realize, for the first time in a long time, that you're safe. Jonathan kept his promise. He stayed. Every morning, he made breakfast. Every night, he kissed foreheads. He read bedtime stories, even when the words blurred with exhaustion. He learned their routines, their fears, their hopes. He learned how to be a father. Not the idea of one, but an actual one. One afternoon, while walking past the park, Mia pointed toward a small tree with fresh blossoms. "That looks like the one Mommy liked," she said. Jonathan bent down beside her. "Do you want to plant one like it at the new house?" She nodded. And so they did. The very next weekend, he took them to visit the little house Maria once dreamed of owning. He'd bought it quietly. Had it cleaned, repaired, but left one thing untouched, the tree in the front yard Maria used to sit beneath when she wrote in her notebook. Jonathan stood at the porch with the girls and said, "This is where your mother once dreamed we'd live together. Now, if you want, we can." They all nodded, quietly. That night, they didn't just move in. They returned. Returned to something Maria had built with love, even in her absence. Each room held echoes of what could have been. Now, it would hold what will be. In the corner of the living room, they framed a photo of Maria. And below it, Hope placed her favorite drawing, 5 stick figures under a big yellow sun, one of them holding a teddy bear. Below it, she'd written, "Now we're not missing anymore." A week later, Ellie handed Jonathan a folded note before bed. He opened it after they'd all fallen asleep. "Dear Dad. I used to think being strong meant not needing anyone. But now I think being strong is letting someone stay, even after they've been gone. Thank you for staying. Love, Ellie. Jonathan sat for a long time after that. He didn't cry. He just let it settle, like warmth in his chest he hadn't felt since Maria. The next morning, they went to visit the cemetery. It had rained the night before. The grass was wet. But the sky was clear. Ellie placed a white rose on the grave. Mia laid a hand-drawn card. Hope tied a ribbon around the headstone. June placed her final gift, the old teddy bear, now clean, stitched, loved back to life. Jonathan knelt down. He didn't say much. Just this. Maria, they're okay. And I'm okay now too. Because of them. Then, as he stood, Ellie reached for his hand. June looked up at him and said, "Come on, Dad. Let's go home."